Hey garden friends, welcome to my channel. And it's that time of year again, it's garden planning season. In today's video, I'll walk you through that process, which includes looking back at last year's garden, what worked, what didn't work, and planning the layout for this year's garden. If you're planning a garden too, grab a notebook and let's do this together. And don't forget to subscribe because I'm going to dive into seed starting in the next video. So let's get started. Before I plan anything new, I like to reflect on what went well, what didn't, and what changes I need to make. For example, my tromboncino squash absolutely thrived on my garden arch. It was gorgeous and stayed pest and disease free pretty much for the whole season, which is definitely a winner. But my other winter squash and my plans to incorporate more flowers didn't go exactly as I had hoped, so I need to make some adjustments there this year. It was mostly due to neglect and poor planning, so I'm going to make sure I focus on that and address those issues as I map out what I plan to do this spring-summer. This is why the assessing step is so important, because it helps you avoid making the same mistakes again and helps you improve your garden each year. So let's get into the next step, which is seed selection. So this is one of my favorite steps, of course. I think it's most gardeners' favorite, is selecting their seeds and planning what they're going to grow for the upcoming season. I'm bringing back some tried and true favorites like the tromboncino squash I mentioned earlier, and some of my favorite pepper varieties like the Ozark Giant. But I'm also adding a few new varieties that I'm excited about. I'm also focusing on dwarf and compact varieties this year. This is going to help me keep my small space manageable by not allowing the plants to get overwhelming by the end of the season. Talking to you, indeterminate tomatoes, which is a problem that I felt I've had in previous years. So I'm looking forward to that. Last year was my first time working with dwarf tomatoes, which was really awesome. I didn't give them the love and attention they needed last summer because I got busy and was traveling a little more than I originally planned, but I do intend to give them all that they need so they thrive. So I'm really looking forward to that. I also found a few other compact varieties of plants that I love, like container okra, corn, eggplant, quite a few, and I'm excited to try those out in my space because I am limited in space, but doesn't stop me from wanting to plant a little bit of everything. So all in all, I'm making a few adjustments this year, like new varieties, new trellises and arches, and new placements in the garden to mitigate any issues that I had last year. If you're growing anything new this year, let me know in the comments. What's new for you this year? What's a favorite that you plant in your garden every year? Now that I've picked my seeds, it's time to get organized. I do this by making a detailed list of what seeds I'm starting, how many of each, and when I need to plant them. For example, I started my tomatoes and peppers in my AeroGarden in February, and that's a more accelerated process. And if you're interested to see how you can start seeds in a hydroponic system, I have a video linked below. Normally I would start those in January if I was going the traditional route. So I started those in February, but other plants like beans and nasturtiums are better direct sown. So I'm gonna set those outside as soon as it starts warming up. I got the dates for my planting out dates and seed starting dates from almanac.com. It's a great resource. And I have the website for that linked below as well. This isn't sponsored, just something that I use, an additional tool I use for my seed starting. So now that I have everything written out and I know how many of each I want to start, or at least how many I plan to plant in the garden, I always plan a few extras. Now it's time to get into the actual layout, and I'll show you how I map that out. So I don't use a fancy program per se. There are some out there that do garden planning and layouts, and they're pretty cool. I know Almanac has one for a fee. Seed to Spoon has one as well. So you can look into those. I like to use just good old graph paper. In my case, digital graph paper. I just use my iPad and I use a program called GoodNotes. It's not made for garden planning. It's just like a notebook, a digital notebook, and they have some options for graph paper, which I'll show you in a second. And that's how I map my garden out. And I've also used straight up regular pencil and regular graph paper in real life to help me map out my garden as well. So again, I'm in the GoodNotes app and I'm starting with a piece of graph paper, but if you don't know how to select that, you just go to the plus sign on the right top corner, and that's how you can pick different paper settings. Now I'm going to select the shapes tool at the top to map out the garden beds. So to scale my beds, I like to use 2 of these boxes to equal 1 foot. So in this example, this is a 2x6 bed, so 2 feet are going to be 4 boxes. I hope that makes sense. Now I will draw the long side, which is the 6-foot side, and according to our scale, we need 12 boxes to equal 6 feet. And the reason why I like to use the shapes tool is because no matter how squiggly the line I make, it auto-corrects it to a straight line or a perfect shape. So now I'm going to make the grids, the square foot grids, and this will make it easier to understand my 2-box scale. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these nodes, and I'm going to show you how to easily duplicate. You select the lasso tool, or selection tool, I believe it's called, and then you're going to press down and hit duplicate, and that's how you can easily make a second bed without drawing it from scratch, and it'll be the exact same size. Now back to the shapes tool, I'm going to use that to make the arch. These are my 2 center beds that are connected by the arch, and that's how I'm going to make all my growing space accounted for, even my vertical space. One more time, I'll show you another example of how I draw my Vego garden beds, which kind of have a rounded edge, and how I account for that, because that's a little extra growing space than the typical rectangular shape. So I do the same thing. This is a 2x8 bed, so using the same scale. But then with the shapes tool, I'm going to make these kind of half circles on the end, and that's how I make it look close to how the Vego garden beds are, because those little extra corners over there, the rounded parts, I usually sneak in some more plants since they don't fit exactly into the square foot area that I have in the center. And again, always accounting for that vertical growing space, I'm going to use the shapes tool to make a circle, and this is going to represent the obelisk that I had in the center of the bed that I used to grow cucumbers. So there you have it. That is my method on how I draw my beds. Again, I do this in the app, but I would also do this on plain graph paper the same way. And from here, all I do now is plug in the plants that I'm growing and where I would like them to be placed in the garden. Using that list that we made earlier, I go down that list and I make sure each plant that I have written down is accounted for in a growing space. So right here, I'll place a dwarf awesome tomato, and then right next to it, I'll place another dwarf tomato. This one is the Stony Brook. And then another example over here, I'll show you how, like I mentioned, I use this obelisk to grow cucumbers, and I'll just write down the variety, which is Tasty Green, one of my favorites. Now I usually use black ink, but you could take this a step further by color coding your plants and your vegetables. So let's say I always have herbs in the corner of my bed. So let's say I use green for herbs, so that's the chives, and maybe I'll use this orange color for flowers. So this represents the nasturtium that I'm going to put in the front of this bed. You can take this in so many different directions and make it look better, and whatever's easiest for you to understand. Here I'm showing you a more filled out example. This was my summer bed. I finished it now, but at this time, this is kind of where I was at the moment. And here is a completed one that I did for my fall garden, which as you can see is full of brassicas and garlic and things like that. During this part of the visualization sketching process is when I consider things like crop rotation. You don't want to keep planting the same things in the same place year after year. That also helps with pests. If you find pests keep attacking a certain plant in a certain space, it might be a good idea to move it to a different part of your garden to kind of shake things up. I also make sure that my taller plants that I have planned, like my okra and corn, are not shading out smaller plants. So I'm making sure that placement is right. It's also the right time to start looking at your companion planting. So for example, I like to plant my basil by my tomatoes and my dill near my cucumbers, and I like to put onions and nasturtiums everywhere that I can, because nasturtiums are great trap crops and onions are pest deterrents as well. And that's my garden planning process. I hope you found this helpful. It's helpful to me because it allows me to be organized and stay on track, so I make the most out of my space. Next up, I'll be seed starting, as I mentioned, so make sure that you hit that notification bell so you don't miss that video. Also, let me know in the comments what's something you're excited about this year. I would love to hear about your garden plans and any tips and tricks you use to get ready for the season. That's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. As always, happy growing.